Hey there, Mickey Barfield with the Polyhedral Knights. Today we're going to be talking about character creation in Wasteland Sagas. So if you have any questions after this, just hit me up in the comments below. Also make sure to click subscribe and like. We really do appreciate that. Thanks and have a great day. Okay, we're going to go over character creation. And if you get your character sheet, you can look over that. You'll be able to follow along with this a lot better. It's in the PDF of the book. If not, and the physical book, you'll find it in the back as well too. So typically with most games you want to come up with a concept, and usually what you want to start off with in this game here is you want to start off with your origin type. Whether you're a pure-born human, bunker-born, or topside-born, meaning you have no mutations, or it can be a mutant, which obviously has mutations, or planet android. So you have those four species that you can pick from and play. So on page 8, you'll see the character origin section, pure human, bunker raised. Then you have pure human, topside raised, mutant, and then android. And each of these have certain perks and benefits to them by playing them. So if you look over those, it'll tell you those things to add in, or bump certain things up, or suffer certain penalties. Then you want to buy your attributes. And attributes can be found for their definitions on page 9. Now, if you've played any kind of RPG before, you probably know what most of these things are, like strength, constitution, agility, willpower, charisma, intelligence, and technical. And these range from 1 through 10. 1 being absolute garbage, 10 being the best peak you can be. And in the game, you have 42 points to spend, and they spend 1 per 1. So, if I spent 4 points in strength, I'd have a 4 in my strength, which would be about average. 4 and 5 is your average person out in the wasteland. So once you go through all that, you've allocated your attributes, you're probably getting some idea of maybe if your person wants to be more combat heavy, more of a thinker, more of a charismatic type of leader. You can go from there. Now, this game doesn't have archetypes, so you can kind of make whatever type of character you want them to be. So if you want to make a person who's a blacksmith who also knows how to do combat, you can do that. So then it kicks over into derived attributes on page 10. Now, normally some people will go right into those. I don't like to, mostly because you might have certain things that might bump them up or change them based off your benefits or your weaknesses. So we'll circle back to that. So your weaknesses start on page 12. Now, the reason I start with weaknesses first is in order to get benefits, you have to have some weaknesses. And your weaknesses will have points to them. So let's say, for example, if you take the one branded, means you've done something bad, were imprisoned, and they probably branded you. And if people see that, they'll know, oh, this person's a criminal. And they were a criminal over at this place here. So that person would get 2 points of weaknesses, which means they have now 2 points they can spend on benefits. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, the maximum you can have in weaknesses is up to 10 points. So you can have up to 10 points in weaknesses. When you have your points, up to however many you've taken, you can actually then spend them on benefits. Now, benefits also spend kind of like what we did here for your weaknesses. Oh, that's more like you're just getting those points. But here, for benefits, these are things that will benefit you, do things to help your character out. So, say for example, your character wanted to take extra hit points. So it would cost you 1 point for each level. Now, some of these have levels, some don't. But extra hit points has levels. So maximum levels you can take up to this is 6 points. So each level you take of this costs you 1 of your points you gain from your weaknesses. You can do the math from there and figure that out from there on. Then we kick over to skills. Now skills, they start talking about those on page 23. There's 2 different types of skills. You have leveled skills and non-leveled skills. Leveled skills are in percentile, meaning when you roll to succeed at this, you want to roll your percentile dice, that number or below, in order to succeed. Circling back to your attributes, you'll notice back over on page 10, you'll see the attribute modifier bonus. So in other words, if you had a 6 in, like, say, your dexterity, all dexterity related skills would have a base 3%. That's before you even spend any points on your skills. That chart's also repeated again on page 24. So the character gets 83 points to spend on skills. That's normally if you're a mutant or a android. Now if you're a pure human, you get 88 points, mostly because you don't get some of the cool powers or abilities that the other guys do. So you're a little more skilled. Not by much more though. Anyway, so each point gives that character 10% in their favor for a leveled skill. Non-level skills, these are skills that you don't have to roll for. Either you know it or you don't know it. If you spend 1 point in, say, cooking, you know how to cook. You've only spent 1 point and that's it. If you want 1 point in factions, then you have knowledge of the factions in the area. You only spend 1 point and you know it. Okay. Now, going back to the level skills, for each point, like I said, you get 10% in your favor plus your attribute bonus. Now, the highest you can have in character creation starting off is up to 70% in a skill, unless you have the benefit highly skilled. That one can bump you up above there, but look up under benefits under highly skilled and you'll see what I'm talking about there. So if I spent 5 points on, let's say, area knowledge, I would have 50%. Now, if my intelligence 6, I would have 3%, so I would have 53%. So that's my character's starting skill in area knowledge. So once you spend all those points, you're done for your skills. Combat techniques. Now they start over on page 27. Now this gives your character a little bit more flavor, especially during combat, because in some games, a sword is a sword is a sword, you swing it, you hit, whatever. In this here, you might know how to use blades, and the person next to you might know how to use blades, but you may have been trained more defensively, they may have been trained more offensively, and someone else may be trained more towards trickery. So each of these techniques reflect certain things that you've excelled at in that type of combat, based on what your skill is for that type of weapon, whether it be blades, bow, brawling, heavy melee, heavy range weapon, long arms, pistols. You'll see on page 27 how it breaks it down. Each of those have certain combat techniques, and the definitions of those are the following page on page 28. So, now, how many you get depends on how skilled you are. So, if you have a skill at 50%, you get 1 combat technique. If you have 70% in a skill, you get 2. If you have 90% or higher, you get 3. In this case here, let's say you have a mutant you made and they have a 60% in blades. Since they're right between 50 and 70, they get the 1 technique. Okay, now until I break that 70-point threshold. For blades, let's say for example, if you look on page 27, it lists all these different ones here. Personally, I like defensive strike because in case I get swarmed, I can actually help fend off people. So I would give my guy defensive strike. So with that, if I want to know the definition of that, I just hop over and look at the definition, and defensive strike I know is on page 29. So it tells you the benefits that they get for that. Now, as far as the rules, as far as combat like that, that's a whole different video. You can look up on YouTube, you'll see that there. It goes into that. But this here helps out with such types of things. So now that you've gotten all your combat techniques, now if you have a mutant, or an android, or even if you have a pure human who has bioware or cybernetics, you can hop over to the next section. Now, android designs start over on page 34. If you're playing an android, you start off with 1 positive design. If you want to have more positive designs, you have to take some faulty designs. You can take up to 2 faulty designs, and for each one of those, you get a positive design. So, starting character could have technically up to 3 positive designs. That means they would have 2 faulty designs. So that starts on page 34, like I said, for the android designs. Now, if you have anybody who has bioware or cyberware, androids wouldn't be getting these, but humans or even mutants could take those unless you have the weakness where you have a rejection of these things. So in the benefit, we'll tell you, depends on which level you bought it at, how many points you have for either bio points or cyber points. Now, the bioware starts on page 36 and breaks it all down. So let's say, for example, if you had, say, 4 points of bioware points. If you wanted to get a backup heart, it costs you 2 bio points. And you want to get advanced antibodies, it costs you 1 bio point. And then an increased senses, 1 more bio point. You spent your 4 bio points, and that's the gear or the bioware you have in your body. Now the same goes for cyberware. Now cyberware starts over on page 38, and it's the same thing. You have certain points that you spend to get these cybernetic parts on your body. Mutations. So you start off with 1 free minor mutation. In order to get other mutations, it's a point system. So minor mutations, positive or negative, are worth 1 point. Major mutations are worth 3 points, positive or negative. Now you can take up to 4 points in negative mutations. By doing so, it allows you to buy 4 points in positive mutations. Now the positive or negative can come in either minor or major abilities. Now that starts on page 41. You'll see the descriptions there. I think it starts off with minor mutations first and goes on. And finally almost finally. Then we come to equipment. So equipment is bought. You get 3 die 20 times 3 in rings. Now rings is the currency in here. Now it's not rings you wear on your finger. So people in this time here see that machines were important back then, and they noticed that a lot of machines had these flat circular things fitted in there. Basically they were washers, so they figured they must be important because they were everywhere in these machines. So they have turned that into currency, and they're called rings. So your character has 3 die 20 times 3 in rings to buy things with. Now you start off with the basic clothes and shoes. As a GM, I'm pretty damn stingy, so if as a GM you feel you want them to have more, feel free to give them more. But it's up to you. We found this works pretty good, and also by keeping them hungry, it keeps them wanting to work and find things to do. So it kind of turns into an adventure generator. Now, throughout the game, if you want to have things where in some settlements, certain stock is low and they're more expensive, or they have an overabundance of something and the cost is cheaper, you can do that. And this is where the skilled merchant really can come in and shine, whether you're trying to buy something, sell something off, or whatnot, or notice what the market's like. And as far as a player, you could take advantage of that, looking for things that are overabundance in a place, meaning you can get that cheaper. So let's circle back to derived attributes. So after you've gotten all your benefits and your weaknesses and all those other gears and things like bioware or cyberware, it may have altered some of your attributes, and this will also affect things like your hit points or your defensive bonus. So on page 10, you'll see where it starts the formulation for how you acquire your hit points. It's your strength times 2 plus con times 3 plus your willpower, and that's your hit points. Defensive bonus. Now this here, it's going to be like usually one or the other, okay? It's going to be dodge or parry bonus, or your DR. DR is your damage resistance. So in other words, if you got some big lumbering guy who's got a 9 strength, he's going to have 2 DR, which means he shrugs off 2 points of damage. On the flip side, if you got somebody who's very nimble, let's say a 9, they're not 9 on their agility, then they would get +7 to their dodge or parry, meaning, let's say for example, you got this guy here, he's got a 9 in that, and he's got +7 for his dodge parry. And his blades he has is 73%. 3 from, his base attribute, 70 points from the 7 points he spent on there, so 73 points. But if he was trying to parry somebody's attack, he gets to add that 7% to that 73, kicking it up to 80, which means he's pretty good at parrying people's attempts at hitting him. Now for further details in combat, like I said, we have that video for combat. Next is heal rate. This is what you heal back per day without any kind of medical aid. Perception is a fixed stat because either you're observant or you're not, and it's linked to your willpower, because your willpower is your attention to detail as well, whether you're really observant. Experience, obviously there's a whole section for that, and as far as how you gain experience. Languages. Now everyone speaks English here, but you find that there's other things like mutant speak, Latin, tech speak. Factions have their own languages sometimes to try to keep things secret amongst themselves. So you see a list of that over on page 11, and it's all based off your intelligence. So if you have a 5 intelligence, it means you speak 2 languages. Highly recommend it be English and then one other one. And other additional derived attributes is things like shock. based off your constitution is what you have here. And that number, like say for example, if you have a 7 in your constitution, it means you have a shock save of 16. So if you take a massive amount of damage or get poisoned or something like that, the GM will ask you to roll a d20. You want to roll that number or below, or suffer the effects of that. Movement is your agility times 2 plus 1/3 your strength, round down. This is how far you move in yards in one turn. If you're using miniatures, especially helpful for that. Your initiative is your agility plus half your intelligence, round down. So that's your static number there. So during combat, they'll ask you to roll for initiative. You roll a d10, add that number, highest number goes first, and it descends on down from there. Toxicity. Now, this is a little different from your hit points. This actually measures what your body can accept in levels of poisoning, like radiation, mutagens, and other harmful toxins that get into your body through the environment, what you eat, drink, or whatever. So that formulation there is how much you can take, and of course as it gets lower, you get sicker and things can become problematic. Damage bonus is based on your strength. This adds towards your hand-to-hand or your melee. And then we come to luck. Luck is what you spend to basically pull your fat out of the fryer. Most people have 3 unless you have something else that actually gives you benefit towards more, or the GM may award you some throughout play of game. And all these here can be spent post-roll, after a roll. So if, say for example, you're trying to disarm a bomb and you flub it by 5%, you can say, hey, I want to spend a luck. You get 10% in your favor, save your bacon. And you can stack these. If you want to spend 2 or 3 to get 20 or 30% in your favor, you can, but you'll blow your wad. And you can also spend these luck for your allies in your team. Let's see, you can also spend it for doing maximum damage. Let's say you hit some guy, you did crap on the damage, and you can't accept that, you can spend your point to do maximum damage on them. And finally, if you've taken a massive amount of damage, you don't want to take that, you can spend it to cut that damage in half, round down. So, that covers character creation for your character. If you have any further questions, feel free to write in the comments or write me directly. I'm happy to answer questions. And as always, thank you again for your support and your interest, and look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day.